Visiting Universal parks today, they're obviously very ride focused, and I can't complain when most of those rides are pretty good. However, one of the major changes I've seen over the decades is, well, exactly this, a focus on rides. One of the elements that I miss most about Universal parks is their shows, and while they're not completely devoid of them, as they still have a fair few, including the recent and impressive Born Stuntacular, it is very much something that they seem to have moved away from. With the closing of the special effects show and animal actors, in favor of what I anticipate will be a spectacular roller coaster in Universal Hollywood, that park itself is actually only left with just one remaining show, Waterworld. When Universal Studios Hollywood was established as an actual attraction in 1964, featuring a tram tour that allowed up-close looks at sets and movie production, the tour itself also included a number of small shows and demonstrations that allowed you insight into the movie-making process. One of these was a small Western-themed shootout using a few stuntmen, and from this, Universal would invent the theme park stunt show. This actual Western show itself would evolve throughout the decades, becoming a massive hit in its 1980 iteration and eventually acquiring its most popular name as the Wild 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 West Stunt Show in 1992. From its success, Universal developed a number of other shows themed around stunt work throughout many of their other parks, including porting it over to Universal Studios Florida in 1991. Some of the better-known stunt-based experiences include the 8th voyage of Sinbad at Islands of Adventure, as well as the iconic Terminator 2 3D, which was popular at both of the American studio parks. There are plenty of others that I could talk about, but one of the more interesting ones was the Miami Vice Action Spectacular, which ran for 7 years in the space where Waterworld is currently located in Hollywood. So today, let's take a brief look at one of Universal's shortest-lived, but still technically innovative stunt shows, themed around an impressive tropical stage, and providing you with an exciting dose of high-octane criminal intrigue. A quick favor, but if you haven't already done so, you can help this video out by leaving a like. As a film lot, Universal obviously designed a lot of attractions based around movies and television shows that were filmed there. After the A-Team premiered on NBC in 1983 to excellent viewership, Universal built an outdoor amphitheater and developed a stunt show around the IP, opening the following year in 1984. Known as the A-Team Live Action Stunt Show, it seems to me as if the set was erected quickly and cheaply in this dirt lot, leading me to believe that this was always intended to be a temporary form of promotion. The actual show itself consisted of stunt actors portraying the popular cast of the A-Team, recreating specific stunts from iconic scenes in the show. Using plenty of vehicles and pyrotechnics, it seemed like something that would have been impressive for its time, but as something that I believe was intended to be temporary, the show did only run until 1987, leaving time for the set to be completely overhauled into a complex stunt pool featuring a tropical island. Originally, the replacement show was intended to be themed around Rambo, but that was changed last minute to Miami Vice, leading to a mad scramble to rework the show 4 months before opening. Now known as the Miami Vice Stunt Spectacular, based around the popular television series which ran from 1984 through 1989, it was developed at a cost of $5.4 million. The set was designed to provide unique views of the action, no matter where you managed to sit in the amphitheater. It was intended to give you a close-up look at how dangerous stunts and special effects were performed in movies. That's a bit of an odd premise, since Miami Vice was a television series, but considering the original concept of Rambo and wanting to promote the excitement of special effects-driven films, the connection does make sense. The show was also a significant evolution in the production value of Universal stunt shows, building a 75,000-gallon pool large enough to drive a speedboat through, and using a generous number of pyrotechnics and other special effects to simulate absolute mayhem. In regards to the stuntmen working on the show, the actual stunt work itself was incredibly dangerous, complex, and judging from a promotional video, quite ironically funny.
Action! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12!
Believe me, if your timing is off, you can make one mistake and you have the end result of this.
But when it all works right, which is almost all the time, you have an end result that looks like no other live show you've ever seen.
Featuring 50 dangerous stunts, the show ran roughly 18 minutes and truly brought Universal stunt shows to the next level. Because so many special effects and moving components were involved, the show would need to be pretty technologically advanced to achieve such tight, controlled action. An example of this is the prop firearms used by the actors, equipped with radio transmitters that would send a signal to the control booth when the trigger was squeezed, prompting the technical director to utilize pyrotechnics and sound effects to convincingly portray the action in front of the audience. With a remarkably quick development time of only around 6 months, Universal's new and ambitious Miami Vice Stunt Show would then premiere in 1988.
Universal's new hit show, Miami Vice, is pure action and incredible realism. It stuns you as Crockett and Tubbs battle vicious smugglers against overwhelming odds.
As audience members gather in the theater, they see a tropical hideout located in the water in front of them, with stuntmen acting as smugglers performing miscellaneous tasks as they wander around the island. The stunt show itself is centered around the Miami Vice main characters, Sonny Crockett and Ricardo Tubbs, 2 undercover detectives that work for the Metro-Dade Police Department. As the show begins, one of the lookouts positions himself on the ship, yelling to the other thugs to hurry up because he can hear someone approaching. Tense music begins to play throughout the theater, and it suddenly breaks out into an exciting track as Crockett and Tubbs round the corner in a speedboat, guns blazing and causing mayhem as they provoke a firefight with the smugglers. They round the bend and beach the boat, jumping out onto the dock and taking cover behind foliage and cargo. The firefight then continues with a number of special effects as they prance around, reveling in the glory of their violence. Notable stunts here include a smuggler on wires who blasts through a doorway after Tubbs hits him with a shotgun to the chest. Meanwhile, Crockett engages in a firefight with a thug on the water tower, finally hitting him and falling through the wooden railing. As our heroes finish cleaning up the island, a man steps out and yells "Cut!", introducing himself as the director as the scene begins to reset. Walking out onto the dock, he welcomes everyone to the Miami Vice Action Spectacular, and provides a bit of information on the premise of the show. He describes how the set is a smuggler's hideout, located on an island not too far from the Florida Keys, and that Crockett and Tubbs are here to investigate stolen explosives that were stashed here. One of the actors playing the thugs has rowed out in a boat by this point, reacting with hurt pride at being described as sleazy and ugly by the director. He spitefully splashes the director, who warns him to stop, and as a response, he stands up brandishing a firearm, challenging him to do something about it. The director turns and snaps his fingers, triggering an explosion in the water and causing one of the other stuntmen to go flying as he continues to taunt the thug. He then points to the booth in the stands, describing how the technical director is the one who coordinates all these special effects, asking him to begin prepping the next scene. He then briefly provides exposition as Crockett and Tubbs re-enter the stage, stating that they're investigating the island and trying to find evidence of stolen dynamite. As they search, more thugs sneak around, and as Crockett looks in the shed, one of them begins firing, hitting the dynamite and causing the shed to explode. Our heroes then try to evade the approaching enemy, with Tubbs running along the balcony and bursting through the wooden railing down to the cover below. They then run across the island, retreating down a hatch that seems to lead under the dock. 2 of the ruffians then run up, with one of them firing through the door at our seemingly trapped detectives, who then begin to prematurely celebrate their victory. A curtain under the dock drops, and Crockett and Tubbs emerge quickly on standing jet skis, riding around the lagoon and jumping the destroyed dock as these surprise smugglers begin firing at them again. The show does meander a bit at this point, as the other stunt actors get into place, with one of them following on their own jet ski, but at one point Tubbs crashes near the audience as he evades gunfire, swimming to shore and getting captured. However, Crockett turns around and performs a stunt, slicing through and disabling one of the boats that one of the criminals has taken out into the water. From out of nowhere, the director appears again and yells "cut," returning back to his position on the dock as he begins to reset. Through a few comedic lines, he reminds the audience of the role of the technical director and banters around a bit more with the stuntmen. As he walks further onto the dock, the director pranks him by triggering the collapsing effect, and he steps back, scolding the control booth. This portion of the show then consists of another few silly minutes of jokes and puns, as the director describes how the next scene is intended to play out. Once the stuntmen get into place, he emphasizes how important safety is to the show and begins to walk the actor playing Crockett through a safety check for the zipline, as he sets up the next scene where Tubbs gets rescued. The director then runs off stage yelling "action," and Crockett pushes off of the zipline, firing at one of the smugglers as he does so. His distraction allows Tubbs to escape, and they run around the stage for a good minute, performing various stunts as they fistfight their way through the island's thugs. Faced again with firearms, they run around the side of a shed, using it as cover as Tubbs fires back. This buys them time to run further, and as they reach the next shed, a grenade launcher is fired their way, causing them to take cover inside as it barely misses them. One of the villains launches another grenade at the building, causing it to erupt in fire as our heroes are trapped inside. Surprisingly, the doors burst open and Crockett and Tubbs race out in a runaway minecart. I've never seen Miami Vice, but I'm pretty sure that the stunt is inspired by Indiana Jones. Still, it's pretty interesting as they escape and crash through explosive barrels, flying into the water at the end of the track. At this conclusion, the director once more comes out yelling "cut," thanking the stuntmen for performing the scenes and dictating that everyone reset. He then speaks about stunts in the filming process, describing how it's done, and ends up getting into another bantering match with one of the smugglers. Continuing with his expository scene, he enlists one of the stuntmen to demonstrate the high fall, a common technique used in stunt work. The actor is then hoisted up on a platform on a crane. The director pretends to fire at him, and the smuggler comedically over-exaggerates getting hit, falling onto the platform instead of down into the pool, subverting expectations and finishing off the scene by diving gracefully down instead. The director then sets up the next scene, describing how Crockett and Tubbs are back to finish off the thugs once and for all. It begins as they slide down a ramp in a hovercraft, slipping out into the water and boating around as they engage in another firefight. At one point, Tubbs fires at an enemy standing at a mounted machine gun on a metal tower, and as he falls, fires at the gasoline barrels, causing them to ignite and the tower to collapse into the water. Now on shore, they fire at the smuggler on the crane, and at the boat behind him, causing it to explode with spectacular pyrotechnics. Searching the area, our heroes realize that they've defeated the enemy and let their guard down, high-fiving to celebrate their victory. However, a low rumble begins to be heard throughout the stadium, and as it gets louder, it begins to sound like helicopter blades. From behind the smuggler's complex, an impressive helicopter prop rises over the set, which now engages in an even more intense firefight. Tubbs gets back into the hovercraft, circling around and firing at every chance he gets. Crockett then runs up to the water tower and up its ladder, taking cover once he makes it up there. Noticing him, the helicopter turns and fires, causing an effect to trigger as if the water tower has burst open and is releasing all the water. Seeing his chance, Crockett steps out and fires at the pilot, causing the helicopter to spin out of control. It maintains its altitude for a second, but begins sinking downwards, finishing off this scene with a spectacular explosion as if it has crashed. For the final time, the director yells "cut" and runs out onto the stage, thanking the audience for attending the show, and naming off the stuntmen who performs their various roles. The Miami Vice Action Spectacular may not have been as exciting as other, more iconic stunt shows throughout the history of the Universal Parks, but it is certainly the one that laid the groundwork for them. This often forgotten show is what really established the successful formula that later made way for more ambitious projects like Terminator and Bourne. What I also really enjoy about Miami Vice is that while it does have a few meandering moments that gives the stuntmen time to reset, the choreography for the show itself is actually quite tight and doesn't waste a lot of time, which was one of the major issues I had with the 8th Voyage of Sinbad in my Lost Continent retrospective. Most relevant to this though is Waterworld, which is what replaced this show in 1995, reusing the same pool and is still quite popular today, even if the movie it's based on did perform poorly at the box office. Having seen Waterworld, while its setting is interesting and the stunt plane at the end is impressive, I actually think that Miami Vice was somewhat better, because I don't think that Waterworld's 90s camp has aged very well, and the show itself does have more meandering sections to pad out its runtime. I would say it's strange that Miami Vice, which seemed to be quite popular, never made its way to Universal Studios Florida, but it actually kind of did. For decades, the nighttime lagoon show in the park has continued to underwhelm park audiences, but I think that a lot of people would be surprised to learn that it did originally host a stunt show, the Dynamite Nights Stunt Spectacular, which opened with the park and ran until 2000. While not directly themed to Miami Vice, it seems clear to me that this high-octane event show was very much inspired by it, even using the soundtrack from the Hollywood version. While many of the stunts were excellent, the show choreography was not nearly as tight, and the flow between the scenes did meander quite a bit because the lagoon is so large. Still, I do really like the idea of hosting a stunt show as a nighttime spectacular, which is far more interesting than anything that has been done since. Returning to Miami Vice, I think that while a lot of people who watch the show will remember it fondly, its short runtime is what led a lot of people to forget about its existence. But I thought that it was worth highlighting because it's actually pretty interesting. Not only that, but it's also a significant milestone in Universal attraction history, helping to establish a working formula and show that expensive, complicated stunt shows were something that really resonated with park crowds. So, hopefully, you enjoyed this brief look at one of Universal's important but more historically unknown stunt shows, and if you haven't already done so, you can help this video reach a wider audience by simply leaving a like. As always, if you have not yet subscribed and hit the bell icon, you can do so now to be alerted to new videos as they release.